The millionaire
Daniel
tested his
Whitmore, a
girlfriend
young billionaire
with a
with
lie,
everything anyone could ever
but his
dream of,
maid
yet happiness
proved
still
true
eludes him.
love. London
But
glowed at
inside
night,
Daniel's
bathed
mind,
in
a
golden and
haunting
white
question
lights.
lingers. Does she love him
Cars
or only
sparkled
the
along
wealth and
winding
power he
roads like
represents?
strands of light.
A bold
And
idea
skyscrapers
forms.
rose
What
like
if she
pillars of
abandons him
power
when he
piercing
loses
the
everything?
sky. From
Only
the
then could he
60th
discover
floor
true
of his
love.
Whitmore penthouse,
Daniel decides
Daniel
to stage a
Whitmore
horrifying
gazed down
accident,
at the city,
confining himself
his
to a
chin
wheelchair
resting on his
to
hand,
test her heart.
his eyes distant. From
But will
this
true
height,
love
it
survive
seemed he
greed and
possessed
ambition?
everything power,
A story of
money,
deception,
fame.
sacrifice,
And
and
yet his
genuine
heart
love is about
remained
to
empty,
unfold.
a hollow space no wealth could ever fill. Daniel was born into a middle-class family in Manchester. His childhood was neither deprived nor rich. From a young age, Daniel showed a sharp mind and a determination far beyond his peers. While other children dreamed of superheroes, Daniel dreamed of real power, the kind that could turn ideas into reality. He buried himself in books, immersed in technology and programming. Endless nights before the computer never exhausted him. Each line of code was a step closer to building his own empire. At 22, Daniel founded Whitmore Technologies in a tiny Manchester room. No one believed that a young man with no real power could create a global software company within 8 years. But Daniel never cared about others' doubts. For him, only one rule mattered: results speak louder than anything. Every major project, every lucrative contract, every meeting was planned with the precision of a military campaign. By the age of 30, he stood at the peak of success, known as the Prince of Technology of the United Kingdom. Looking back, Daniel felt proud of all he had achieved. Yet alongside that pride was an emptiness one no amount of money or recognition could cure. He had it all: luxurious penthouses overlooking London, Italian supercars, private yachts, even a jet at his disposal. But in the midst of all that grandeur, he discovered that luxury only magnified his loneliness. Sophia Blake, the famous actress, was always at his side at elite parties and grand events. She was dazzling, seductive, and flawless. People compared her to a shining star in the night sky. With her radiant beauty, captivating smile, and sharp eyes, Sophia became the symbol of fame and prestige. At first, Daniel thought he had found true love, but his heart whispered otherwise. Did Sophia love him for who he was, or for everything attached to the name Daniel Whitmore? He began to observe her closely. When he gave her lavish gifts, her bright smile never quite hid the quiet distance in her eyes. Whenever he opened up about fears or insecurities, Sophia grew distant, fading like a dim star against the backdrop of his brilliant life. Daniel noticed a subtle truth: those drawn only to wealth and fame would always retreat when he revealed his vulnerabilities, but those who truly loved would stay, no matter what he lacked. One October night, London sparkled outside, yet Daniel sat in silence, with a half-filled glass of whiskey before him. He no longer felt its bitterness or warmth. The only thing he felt was the void inside. And then an idea both reckless and desperate took root. If Sophia truly loved him, she would stay, even if he lost everything. But if her love was built on glamour, she would vanish the moment the lights went out. Daniel confided in his longtime doctor and childhood friend, Henry Collins. He revealed his reckless plan to fake an accident, to pretend he was paralyzed from the waist down, all to test Sophia's heart. Henry was horrified. He warned Daniel that he was gambling not only with Sophia's heart, but with his own soul. But Daniel's eyes, firm yet fragile, silenced him. Henry knew well, once Daniel made a decision, no one could sway him. The plan was laid with meticulous detail. Forged medical reports, rented hospital equipment, a carefully staged accident, every gesture rehearsed, every word measured. Daniel would vanish for several days, then return with a tragic tale and a wheelchair-bound body dependent on others. That sleepless night, Daniel watched Sophia as she slept, her golden hair cascading over the pillow. He wondered when she realized the man beside her no longer had power or strength. How would her eyes look at him then? In that moment, Daniel understood a truth. All the money, power, and fame he owned could never buy the one thing he yearned for: genuine love. His heart began to race, not for ambition or victory, but for the dangerous test he was about to face. A game of love as perilous as it was brave. Daniel was no longer just a businessman, obsessed with numbers. He was a man searching for truth, even if that truth would cut him deeply. Out there, London gleamed with light and power, but none of it mattered anymore. All he wanted was to know, did real love exist, or was it only an illusion painted by wealth and fame? And in that silent moment, with city lights reflected in the glass, Daniel lifted his head. A faint, enigmatic smile crossed his lips, the smile of a man ready to strip away power and glory and risk everything to discover the love he had always longed for. Chapter 1. Introducing Daniel and his luxurious life. London shimmered under the glow of night. Cars curved along the streets like tiny streams of light. Skyscrapers flickered through the thin fog, and the city breathed as if it never slept, a place of rhythm, ambition, and power. From the 60th floor of the Whitmore penthouse, Daniel Whitmore stood in silence, his gaze stretching across the vast world below. To him, that world was nothing less than a map of power, a kingdom he could command with the slightest glance. Yet, in that quiet moment, his heart felt hollow. He possessed everything a man could desire, yet true happiness always slipped through his fingers. At just 30, Daniel had already become one of Europe's youngest and most successful billionaires. Whitmore Technologies, the company he had built from nothing in only 8 years, had grown into a global software empire celebrated for innovation and dominance. Numbers on the reports were more than profit. They were symbols of his sharp mind, relentless ambition, and unshakable determination. Each major project, every lucrative deal, every tense negotiation, Daniel calculated them all with the precision of a grandmaster at the chessboard. But even as he stood among the Italian leather chairs, imported rugs, massive abstract paintings, a garage of Italian supercars, and a yacht anchored at the pier, something was missing. His private jet stood ready to whisk him anywhere in the world within moments, but nothing could carry him closer to happiness. All the material grandeur only deepened his loneliness. He had everything except the one thing that mattered most: true love. Beside him was Sophia Blake, a famous actress the press often hailed as the brightest star of British cinema. Radiant, dazzling, flawless, she was described as a rare jewel admired by all. Golden hair, sparkling blue eyes, a smile that could disarm anyone, Sophia embodied beauty and fame. She graced magazine covers, glided across red carpets, bathed in the flash of cameras like an untouchable angel. In this glittering world, Daniel once believed he had found love. Sophia was always there by his side at elite parties, present at every important event. But his sensitive, cautious heart noticed something unsettling. Sophia loved the glamour, the lavish gatherings, the admiring eyes fixed on Daniel. Yet whenever he tried to speak of his fears, his pressures, his moments of solitude, she grew distant. Her gaze would pass through him without settling, her radiant smile shining, but stripped of warmth. Daniel learned to read every gesture, every pause, every glance, the instinct of a sharp businessman. He realized that those who love only the light will vanish when darkness falls. True love stays even when power and wealth are stripped away. And so a question haunted him. Did Sophia love him, or only what he owned? One October evening, London's lights twinkling far below the penthouse, Daniel sat quietly in his armchair. Half a glass of whiskey rested on the table, its bitterness unable to stir his senses. All he felt was emptiness. Then an idea struck, reckless, daring, dangerous. If Sophia truly loved him, she would stay even if he lost everything. But if her love was built on glitter, she would disappear once the light dimmed. He called his private physician, Henry Collins, a lifelong friend who had known him since boyhood. Henry had stood beside him from the early days of Whitmore Technologies, when Daniel still wrestled with lines of code and dreams larger than himself. That night, Daniel shared his plan to stage an accident to pretend he was paralyzed from the waist down to test the truth of Sophia's love. Henry resisted fiercely. "Daniel, do you really think you can do this without breaking someone's heart? This isn't a game." But Daniel's eyes held both determination and a hidden fragility only Henry could see. And Henry knew, once Daniel had made up his mind, nothing could stop him. The plan unfolded in meticulous detail. False medical records prepared hospital equipment, rented the accident staged with care. Every gesture, every line Daniel would say, rehearsed until perfect. He would vanish for a few days, only to reappear with a story of tragedy confined to a wheelchair, dependent on others. In the sleepless nights that followed, Daniel would lie awake watching Sophia rest peacefully, her golden hair spilling across the pillow. He wondered how her eyes would change when she discovered the man she once loved no longer carried strength or power. For Daniel knew wealth, fame, power, all the things he once took pride in, meant nothing if he could not find real love. The deepest longing of the human soul could never be bought, only given by a sincere heart. And so, in that quiet moment, Daniel smiled the smile of a man ready to embrace the test ahead. A dangerous game of the heart, impossible to avoid. London glittered beneath his feet, but his heart was set on one thing alone: true love, something no one and nothing could ever replace. Chapter 2: Doubting Love and the Plan of Pretending. London at night glowed with the lights of towering skyscrapers, but inside the Whitmore penthouse on the 60th floor, that brilliance seemed unable to reach Daniel. He stood before the wide glass window, eyes fixed on the stream of headlights weaving through the city below, his mind tangled in restless thoughts. In his hand rested a half-filled glass of whiskey, its bitterness no longer stirring his senses. Surrounded by luxury, cloaked in power, yet no smile, no gaze could lift the hollow weight inside him. Sophia Blake, his famous girlfriend, was always by his side. But with each passing day, Daniel felt the sting of a painful truth. She did not love him for who he truly was, but for everything he possessed. Lavish parties, extravagant vacations, priceless gifts. Sophia's radiant smile always shone brightest, when he placed such treasures in her hands. Yet when he shared his fears, his struggles, his days of unease, she drifted away like a fading shadow, leaving only the ache of emptiness in his heart. He remembered the times she was absent during his hardest battles, the days when life or death decisions for the company weighed on his shoulders and she was nowhere to be found. Staring at the glittering city lights below, Daniel could not silence the question that cut through his pride like a cold blade. Did Sophia truly love him? Or was she only enchanted by the wealth, power, and fame? Unable to bear the gnawing doubt any longer, Daniel resolved to find the answer in his own way, in a way only he dared attempt. He called Dr. Henry Collins, his private physician and loyal friend since boyhood. When Henry entered his office, his eyes swept across the modern space brimming with signs of wealth and power. Daniel turned to him, gaze heavy with determination. "Listen to me, Henry." Daniel began, his voice low and firm. "I need to know if Sophia loves me for myself or for everything I own. I want to stage an accident." Henry let out a short, incredulous laugh, though his eyes were clouded with concern. "An accident, Daniel? You can't be serious. What are you planning? This isn't a game. Do you realize what you're about to do? You'll be living a lie and shattering someone's heart." Daniel stayed silent, his eyes meeting Henry's steady, yet fragile, the kind of look that told Henry the decision had already been made. Daniel had thought it through, weighed the consequences, and nothing could turn him back. "My plan is detailed." Daniel continued, his voice deep and unwavering. "I'll disappear. For a few days, create the illusion of a terrible accident. When I return, I'll be in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down, dependent on others for everything. And Sophia's reaction, that will be the answer." Henry exhaled, his head lowering, as he stared at Daniel's clenched hand. "Daniel, what you're speaking of is cruelty. This is a test of morality. Not everyone can face such a game without breaking deeply." Daniel nodded, his tone quieter but resolute. "I know, Henry. I'm not proud of this plan. But if I want the truth, I must do it. I cannot live in doubt forever. I need to know whether her love is real or just an illusion." The room fell silent, broken only by the whisper of wind against the windows and the soft glow of golden light spilling across a desk piled with papers. Henry looked at Daniel and saw in him not the hunger of a man addicted to power, but the yearning of one desperate for true love. Preparations began with painstaking detail, forged medical records, rented hospital equipment, every scene of the accident carefully designed. Daniel rehearsed each gesture, every word, every look, until no one could doubt his performance. Perfection was essential, every detail flawless, so Sophia would never glimpse the truth behind the illusion. On sleepless nights, Daniel gazed at the city lights, his mind filled with Sophia, her radiant smile, her sparkling eyes, and the invisible distance he had never felt so keenly before. He wondered if Sophia left him when wealth and power were gone. How would it feel? And if she stayed, if she chose him, even then, he would know it was real love, not desire for riches or fame. The thought both unsettled him and drove him forward. Daniel knew the plan was ruthless, but for him, it was the only path to truth. He alone could make this choice, and he alone would bear the weight of every consequence. That night, the penthouse ceased to be merely a palace of wealth. It became the stage for a moral trial, for a delicate game, where Daniel himself would be both director and leading actor. Closing his eyes, he drew a deep breath, and in that moment, he understood he was stepping into the greatest test of his life, the test of a woman's heart, and the search for real love in the midst of riches, power, and loneliness. With that resolve, Daniel knew that by morning, everything would change. No longer just grand parties or the glittering lights of London. What lay ahead was a dangerous, daring game of the heart, a game that might finally give him the answer he had long been searching for. Chapter 3: Preparing and Staging the Accident. As dawn broke over London, pale golden light slipped through the tall glass walls of the Whitmore penthouse, spilling across the polished floor. Daniel Whitmore stood before the mirror, studying every movement of his body, down to the smallest gestures. Today marked the beginning of the most crucial stage of his plan, the staging of the accident that would test the truth of Sophia's love. In the spacious office next door, Henry Collins, his private doctor and lifelong companion since youth, pored over the stack of forged medical records. Pages stamped with fake seals, signed with practiced precision, and filled with carefully calculated health statistics designed to look unquestionably real. Henry slipped them into a hardbound folder with the care of a man handling documents that could decide a person's fate. "Daniel, every detail must be exact," Henry said gravely. "One mistake, however small, and Sophia will suspect. If she doubts you, the entire plan collapses." Daniel nodded his hand, trembling slightly as he lifted a glass of water from the desk. Henry was right. Everything had to be perfect. Medical files, body language, tone of voice, even the illusion of shallow, labored breaths. There could be no slip. He had to appear before Sophia as a man truly broken, dependent on others, and only then would her real feelings surface. Henry moved on to the medical equipment: the wheelchair, leg braces, oxygen tank, portable hospital bed. All rented from professional suppliers, carefully chosen to transform the penthouse into a convincing home hospital. Daniel's grand bedroom was converted into a recovery ward, cold white light spilling over pillows, sheets, and neatly placed bottles of sanitizer, every detail engineered to echo reality. Daniel began practicing in the wheelchair. For the first time, he felt the struggles of those truly disabled, unresponsive legs, aching arms straining against the wheels, each movement heavy and unnatural. Hour after hour, he drilled himself hand placement, braking, tilting his weight to balance even where his eyes should fall downward or forward. Every detail had to feel instinctive, never forced. Henry observed, occasionally correcting him. "No, Daniel. Your eyes still hold too much control. In the chair, you need to show fragility just enough. A single twitch of the legs, the slightest misstep, and someone close to you will notice." Tension spread through the penthouse. Daniel's heart pounded, sweat breaking along his brow. This was no longer a game. It was a test of emotion, of morality. He feared Sophia might see through him, feared the plan's failure, feared that when her true reaction finally came, it would unravel everything. Yet beneath the fear was an excitement, an urgency. At last, Daniel would know. Would Sophia love him for who he was, or for what he possessed? The days that followed were grueling. Together, Henry and Daniel constructed the scene of a staged car accident in the mansion's underground garage. Barriers, a simulated vehicle, carefully arranged lighting to mimic chaos. Every rehearsal was filmed. Daniel practiced his cries of pain, the slump of his body in the wheelchair, the exhausted way he leaned back. He trained himself to feign short breaths, subtle winces, the weight of suffering, until it seemed second nature. Words, too, had to be rehearsed. What would he say when Sophia first saw him? How would he pace his voice? Where would he let silence fall? How would he let despair tremble in his tone? Each line repeated dozens of times before the mirror, refining breath, cadence, and expression until even the sharpest eyes would believe. The pressure mounted as Daniel rehearsed his pain, the wince if he shifted too quickly, the gasp if his legs were touched, the vulnerable flicker in his eyes when Sophia would draw near. Henry took careful notes, checking the angle of light in the bedroom, the placement of hidden cameras, ensuring no detail betrayed the illusion. Every night, when the rehearsals ended, Daniel sat alone in the darkened room, staring out at the glittering city. His chest tightened with nerves, anticipation, fear. How would Sophia respond? Would she stay or would she walk away? If the plan failed, what would remain of love or trust between them? Henry watched him with equal parts worry and respect. "You know, Daniel," he said quietly, "this plan is cruel. But if truth is what you seek, there's no gentle road to it. One wrong move and everything crumbles." Daniel's reply was steady, every word carrying weight. "I know, Henry. I'll take full responsibility. I must do this. I have to know if Sophia's love is real." By the next day, the room was fully transformed. The wheelchair at his bedside oxygen tank, at the ready braces, aligned neatly blankets arranged to look lived in. The room glowed with the sterile chill of a hospital. Even the smallest detail, the sanitizer bottle, the thermometer, was in place. Daniel settled into the wheelchair, the strain of immobility pressing down on him. And yet that very weight fueled his resolve. Everything was ready. Every gesture, every word, every breath had been honed to perfection. Standing before the mirror once more, his reflection carried both gravity and determination. He was prepared to step into the greatest trial of his life, a staged accident, both cruel and necessary, a test of love and morality that might finally reveal the truth he had been searching for all along. In the stillness of the night, as the city lights reflected against the penthouse glass, Daniel drew a long, steady breath. His heart raced with tension, fear, and a strange anticipation. But he knew this was the first step toward the ultimate question. Did Sophia love him for himself or for everything he owned? Chapter 4. The Staged Accident and Sophia's Reaction. The grand Whitmore mansion stood in silence under the soft glow of London's sunset. Its lavish walls, oak spiral staircases, and abstract paintings lining the hallways spoke of overwhelming wealth and prestige. Yet tonight, none of that brilliance mattered. The mansion had become the stage for a trial where Daniel Whitmore would uncover the most important truth of his life. Daniel sat in the wheelchair, feeling the weight of his body pressing into his arms, every movement heavy and unnatural. He had practiced for hours to make each gesture believable. His white shirt slightly wrinkled, and his dark tailored vest struck a careful balance, refined but not overly sharp. His hands trembled lightly on the wheels, his breath shallow, his face set in a mask of pain just enough to look real. From the window, sunset poured into the living room, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The vast, luxurious space felt suddenly cold, stripped of warmth, broken only by the faint sound of wheels brushing the ground. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, whispering inwardly, "This is it. Everything must be perfect." Minutes later, the sound of an engine rose outside the mansion. Daniel's heart raced, ears tuned to every noise: the crunch of tires on gravel, the click of heels, the swing of the front door. Then Sophia Blake appeared, gliding swiftly in, wrapped in a fiery red Dior gown, her golden hair catching the light, her makeup flawless. She looked every bit the star, dazzling yet distant. She paused at the end of the hall, her radiant smile framed by eyes that never truly met his. "Daniel? What? What happened?" she exclaimed, her voice trembling, though her poise remained intact. She stepped closer, cautious, careful not to crease the expensive fabric of her dress. Daniel lifted his gaze from the chair, adjusting his expression, voice faltering with practiced weakness. "Sophia, there was an accident. I don't know if I'll ever walk again." Sophia drew in a breath, her eyes grazing his for the briefest moment. She smiled, beautiful, dazzling but cold, like light on the surface of a painting. "All right, but I have a few things I must arrange. Paris, New York, Milan. My schedule is impossible." Her voice still wavered, but quickly shifted into a litany of excuses: campaigns, premieres, fashion weeks. Every word reasonable, every word cutting into Daniel like a blade. He held his mask of pain, though inside his chest, despair surged. He searched her eyes for one true spark, a flicker of worry, a hurried touch, a hand reaching for his. But Sophia only hesitated a moment before continuing, turning toward the door with practiced elegance. Shock overwhelmed him, mingling with disappointment, with a hollowing despair. Hours of preparation, every careful gesture, every rehearsed line, all leading to this truth. And the truth was unbearable. Daniel sat motionless in the vast living room, the silence pressing down like a weight. Sophia had left. No lingering glance, no word of comfort, only absence heavy and sharp. He whispered to himself, so, her love was never real, just an illusion, a fascination with wealth and power. Not me. His eyes blurred, not with physical pain, but with the realization that what he had longed for was nothing more than a shadow. The slam of the front door echoed the crunch of gravel beneath Sophia's heels, rang like the final heartbeat of her performance in his life. Daniel sat still, absorbing everything: the fading sunlight on the glass, the emptiness of the mansion, the cavernous ache in his chest. Wealth, power, luxury, all meaningless, now stripped bare by the simple act of her leaving. And yet, in that crushing moment, a deeper clarity emerged. The glittering world outside and the hollow space within had never been more starkly divided. Sophia had never loved him, only the image, the fortune, the perfection he represented. And through the wound she left, Daniel began to glimpse the pieces he had overlooked, the quiet, genuine hearts that had always been near, waiting unseen. The wheelchair's cold frame pressed against his palms as the light dimmed into evening. Disappointment carved its lines across his face, but in his eyes a new spark flickered. He now knew true love could not be found in the shimmer of gold or the applause of fame. To discover it, he would have to look beyond the dazzling stage into the quiet corners, where sincerity and devotion lived. As night settled over London, the mansion fell into silence. Daniel sat in his chair, hands trembling against the wheels, but inside his heart grasped one profound truth. Sometimes to see the value of real love, you must first lose the brightest illusions. Sophia had given him his answer, one that no explanation could ever replace. This moment marked the first true climax, a shock that left him wide awake. And with it came a new beginning, the start of a chapter where Daniel would learn to seek love not in grandeur, but in the hearts of those humble, devoted souls he had once overlooked. Chapter 5. Emma appears and cares for Daniel. The Whitmore mansion glowed softly in the morning light. Golden rays slipped through the tall curtains, stretching across polished wooden floors, scattering warm beams into the dining and living rooms. The house was as elegant as ever, but today its warmth did not come from luxurious furniture or priceless art. It came from Emma Hayes, the quiet housekeeper who had worked for Daniel for 3 years, yet had gone almost unnoticed by him. Emma entered the breakfast room, carrying a silver tray set carefully with golden fried eggs, crisp toast, a glass of fresh orange juice, and a steaming cup of espresso. "I remember you like it this way," she said gently, her voice low and soothing like the soft background music of dawn. Every movement was natural, unforced, from the way she set down the tray, to how she adjusted the pillow behind his back, to the simple gesture of drawing the curtains just enough to let in a comfortable glow. Daniel looked at her eyes wide, as if seeing her for the very first time. In the dazzling portrait of his old life parties, event celebrities, Emma had been just a faint detail, nearly invisible. But now, in the tender light of morning, her quiet devotion stopped him cold. Not a radiant smile or a glamorous gown like Sophia's, but warm eyes, a gaze filled with uncalculated care, untouched by pretense. "Would you like me to read to you?" Emma asked, holding his favorite novel, turning its pages with care. Daniel nodded, his heartbeat quickening, not with tension or fear, but with a tenderness he hadn't felt in years. Surrounded by luxury and glitter, he had never known a peace like this. Emma tended to every small need, pulling the blanket higher when he shivered, tucking a pillow behind him so he could sit more comfortably, bringing water before he even asked. Her gestures were quiet, constant, like the steady rhythm of breath. No complaints, no pity in her eyes, only sincere care. Daniel felt the sharp difference between Emma and Sophia. Sophia was dazzling, always shining in extravagance, her smiles crafted for an audience. Emma, in contrast, needed no spotlight, no applause. She cared for him simply because she wished to. And in that simplicity, Daniel felt something stir deeply inside him. The scene itself was breathtaking in its quietness. The morning light streaming through the window, the careful breakfast tray, Emma beside him. Daniel realized that through all the years of wealth and glittering company, no one had ever shown him love in this way. Emma's affection was unspoken, hidden in details, steady and enduring. After breakfast, Emma stayed. She gently helped Daniel move from the dining room to the living room, reading aloud the words he loved, filling each page with cadence and life. Her voice made the stories come alive, reminding Daniel he was not alone. Slowly, he began to open up, asking about the books she had read, about her days of hard work, about her younger brother she quietly supported. Daniel found himself smiling genuinely, a rare smile born from the heart. There was no pressure, no tension from boardrooms or contracts, no weight of flashing cameras or public adoration. Only a moment of calm where two people shared space and silence, every gesture flowing with unspoken kindness. Looking at Emma, Daniel realized the most important thing in life was not the cars, the yachts, or the million-dollar deals. It was a heart that knew how to love, how to care, how to give warmth freely. Sophia had never offered him that, and perhaps she never could. Day by day, Emma remained by his side. She pulled up the blanket when the nights grew cold, prepared breakfast in silence, read aloud. When he was too weary, listened to the worries he had never shared with anyone else. Her presence was like a quiet fire in winter, melting the walls of pride and distance he had built around himself. In a hushed morning, as sunlight filled the living room, Daniel realized something new was taking root inside him. A feeling not born of power or prestige, but of honesty, of quiet care of Emma's warm heart. Words could not capture it, but he knew this was what he had long been searching for: someone who loved him simply for who he was. That morning became a turning point. The breakfast tray bathed in soft light, Emma adjusting his pillow, reading with her gentle voice. These details etched themselves into his heart. For the first time in years, Daniel felt at peace, cared for, and loved in the purest way. And in that peace, loneliness slipped away. The emptiness within him began to fill. Every look, every smile from Emma was proof that true love still existed, and that he had overlooked it for far too long, blinded by the false lights of wealth and fame. From that moment, Daniel knew his story with Sophia was no longer the center of his life. A new chapter had begun, one of warmth, tenderness, and awakening. Here, he was not just Daniel Whitmore, the powerful billionaire, but a man finally seen, loved, and cherished for who he truly was. Chapter 6. Daniel realizes Emma's worth. The London evening settled softly, golden light filtering through the wide glass windows of the Whitmore mansion. The living room was filled with silence, broken only by the rustle of wind down the corridor and the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Daniel Whitmore sat in his wheelchair, his hands resting lightly on the rims, his gaze fixed on Emma Hayes, the woman who had quietly stepped into his life. She was not dazzling like Sophia, yet she carried a warmth he had never truly noticed before. Emma stood nearby, still holding the breakfast tray she hadn't bothered to replace with anything else. Today, she did not bring food. Instead, she brought her presence, her eyes soft, patient, and wholly attentive. Daniel, a man long accustomed to the staged smiles and admiring stares of high society, found himself caught by the quiet sincerity shining in Emma's gaze. "Emma, today I want to ask you about your brother Daniel," began his voice low with a slight tremor, something he had never felt when speaking to Sophia. "I heard you sacrifice so much for him, didn't you?" Emma nodded, her eyes dipping with quiet memory. Her voice was calm, yet heavy with the weight of the past. "Yes. Lucas was born with a heart defect. When he was little, surgery was his only chance. But in our small town in Wales, the waiting list was long and the cost overwhelming. I had to leave home, come to London, and work tirelessly to save for the operation." Daniel fell silent, struck by the image Emma, still so young, forced to leave her family, working endless hours to save her brother's life. Her resilience, her devotion, her quiet strength, It shook something deep within him. He realized then that while he had once believed love and care must come wrapped in glitter and grandeur, Emma, simple and unadorned, possessed a richness of heart far greater than anything he had ever known. "So, you gave up everything for him," Daniel said softly, admiration threading through his voice. "And now, he's studying to be a pediatrician?" Emma's lips curved into a gentle smile, her eyes glowing with quiet pride. "Yes, the surgery was a success, and now he wants to help children, so no one else has to suffer the way he did." Daniel drew in a long breath, turning toward the window, as though to steady his heart, but his thoughts circled only around Emma. He thought of Sophia, her glamorous parties, her radiant but hollow smiles, her distance when he needed closeness most. Against Emma's quiet strength, Sophia's image shrank cold and empty. "Emma, I don't know what to say," Daniel murmured, his voice low, and waited. "You've given so much without a word of complaint. I've never met anyone like you." Emma lowered her head, her cheeks tinged with warmth, but her eyes remained gentle. "I only did what needed to be done. I don't want praise or attention. I just wanted Lucas to have a normal life." Daniel looked at her with a heart full of respect and awe. The little things she did, preparing breakfast, adjusting a pillow, reading to him, suddenly carried a meaning deeper than he had ever realized. They were not duties of a housekeeper, but signs of devotion, kindness, and love. Qualities he had never once felt from Sophia. In that moment, Daniel sensed his heart shifting. The walls of pride, the armor of wealth, the distance he had built around himself, they began to crumble. He no longer saw Emma as a faint background detail in his life, but as a woman with depth, with a story, with a soul so genuine it left him humbled. Emma continued telling him of the hardships she endured in London, the long nights, the exhaustion, the solitude, but always with quiet endurance, never bitterness. Daniel listened closely, absorbing every word, every breath, every gesture. He realized that Emma was not just tending to his body, but filling the emotional voids he had thought only fame and power could occupy. In the soft golden afternoon, Daniel leaned closer, his voice steady but warm. "Emma, do you know I've searched for love in the spotlight, in the parties, in the eyes of celebrities? But all of it was only surface. You're the one with a true heart." Emma said nothing, only smiled gently, her hand resting on the book in her lap. She looked at Daniel, her eyes holding an understanding that needed no words. And in that gaze, Daniel felt his heart glow with warmth, steady and alive. The days that followed were filled with conversation. No longer master and servant, no longer divided by wealth or status. They were simply two souls sharing stories, joys, sorrows, hopes, and dreams. Emma spoke of literature, poetry, life's philosophies, and Daniel listened, realizing more and more the depth of her mind and spirit. Each moment with Emma became a lesson that true love was not grandeur, not power, not wealth. It was the quiet devotion, the kindness, the selfless sacrifice. And Emma, in her simplicity yet boundless humanity, had awakened a love in Daniel unlike anything he had ever known. In the pale golden glow of evening, Daniel realized he had found what he had been searching for through years of riches and success, a love sincere and unadorned, yet stronger than any illusion. Emma needed no spotlight, no applause, yet the light she brought into his heart outshone all the glitter of fame. And in that moment, Daniel understood something essential. It was not Sophia Radiant, but shallow, who embodied real love. It was Emma, the quiet, unassuming woman with a generous heart who was the love he had long been seeking. She was the one he could finally open his heart to, the one he would cherish for the rest of his life. Chapter 7. Emma discovers the deception. The London afternoon faded into a soft golden haze slipping through the tall windows of the Whitmore mansion. What had once felt warm and welcoming now seemed heavy, suffocatingly quiet, broken only by the wind whistling through the cracks. Daniel Whitmore sat in his wheelchair, his eyes flickering with unease, unaware that the peace he clung to was about to shatter into one of the fiercest storms of his life. Emma Hayes stepped into his study, the room stacked with company files, medical papers, and the props that supported his illusion of paralysis. She moved carefully, tidying as always, but today her keen eyes caught details that unsettled her. The medical reports looked vague. The health indicators didn't match what she had observed, and some of the equipment in his room felt too staged, too deliberate. Turning the pages, she noticed strange inconsistencies, muscle reflex tests, strength evaluations, and measurements that read like hollow numbers. They didn't resemble the precise details she remembered from caring for her brother Lucas after his heart surgery. She froze her brow, furrowing her heartbeat quickening. Years of caregiving, her meticulous nature, her instinct for noticing the smallest detail, they all converged into one realization: something was wrong. She remembered fleeting moments, Daniel's legs moving too quickly, a sudden reflex when he thought she wasn't watching. She had brushed them aside before, but now combined with these forged records and suspiciously arranged equipment, the truth struck her like lightning. Daniel was pretending. His accident was nothing but an act. Emma staggered back, eyes shut tight, fighting the dizzy wave that swept over her. Every blanket she had adjusted, every meal she had prepared, every book she had read aloud suddenly felt like a kindness exploited. Betrayal pierced her heart, laced with anger and deep disappointment. Not only because she had been deceived, but because she had given him her trust, her quiet affection, and all of it had been tangled in a cruel game. She walked into Daniel's bedroom, her eyes scanning with new awareness. The pillows bore no signs of a real patient's strain. His muscles showed no signs of wasting. Even his feet carried the subtle reflexes of a man still whole. She froze the truth undeniable now. Daniel's story, his paralysis, his dependency, was a carefully crafted lie. Unable to hold back, Emma approached the study again. Her trembling fingers found the safe, code still fresh in her memory, his mother's birthday mentioned once too often. The lock clicked open, and inside lay everything: the contract with Henry Collins for false medical services, the emails arranging rental equipment, the detailed plan of his staged performance. The evidence spilled into her hands, irrefutable. Tears blurred her vision. She collapsed into a chair, papers scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. Every sleepless night, every whispered prayer, every ounce of care she had given, reduced to pieces of a script Daniel had written. She realized with a stabbing clarity that she had loved him within a lie, and she could no longer bear it. Emma gathered the papers, her hands still shaking, and slipped them into her bag. Without a word, Without a final glance, she walked out. Each step on the gravel outside echoed like the pounding of a broken heart. She hailed a taxi, suitcase in hand, her face set with quiet determination. She wasn't leaving because she hated Daniel. She was leaving because she had to protect herself from the cruelty of his game. Inside, Daniel sat unaware, still lost in his act. He heard the faint sounds, the rolling of a suitcase, the slam of a door, and only then realized something had shifted. Sophia's departure had wounded him once, but this was different. The woman who had truly touched his heart, who had cared for him with quiet devotion, was gone. And the weight of that loss pressed down heavier than anything he had ever known. His hands shook on the rims of the chair, breath catching in his throat. The cruel truth washed over him. No wealth, no power, no illusion could hold someone whose love was real. Emma, the woman with a heart more genuine than anyone he had ever known, was gone. And in that hollow silence, Daniel realized he had lost the very thing he had been searching for all along. The Whitmore mansion now stood like an empty shell, echoing with absence. Every hallway, every painting, every oak staircase that once symbolized power, now only reflected loneliness and regret. Daniel pressed his hands to his face, crushed beneath despair, whispering to himself that he had to act, to find her, to beg for forgiveness, to win back her trust. But in this first moment, there was only emptiness, a pain that nothing could soothe. Emma had left him, and he was alone in the hollow grandeur of a world that suddenly meant nothing. The story reached its first great climax. Emma gone, Daniel broken their fragile love, hanging over an abyss. Silence filled the mansion. Dusk dimmed the light, and the wind rattled the windows, a reminder that to reclaim love, Daniel would now have to face trials greater than any he had ever known. Chapter 8: Daniel's Regret and His Search for Emma. The Whitmore mansion sat in silence under London's fading twilight. The rooms that had once echoed with warmth filled with golden morning light, and Emma's gentle care were now cold still and painfully empty. Daniel Whitmore sat alone in his wheelchair in the vast living room, staring through the tall glass windows at the city's glittering skyline where the lights flickered like distant stars. His heart carried a weight of despair he had never known, for he realized he had lost the most important person of all Emma Hayes. In panic and anguish, Daniel called Dr. Henry Collins, his closest friend, his accomplice in the cruel plan meant to test Sophia. "Henry, she knows. Emma, she's gone. I have to find her." Daniel's voice trembled, caught between remorse and desperation. Henry's sigh came heavy through the line, his tone steady and calm. "Daniel, perhaps the best thing you can do is let her go. You've gone too far, far beyond what anyone should." But Daniel could not listen. He knew his feelings for Emma were no game, no scheme, no pretense. This was the only truth he had ever known the first time love had felt real. He swore to himself by any means he would find her, beg her forgiveness, and prove that he was worthy of the trust she had once given. First, he had to close the chapter of his past. Memories of Sophia Blake, her radiant smile, her dazzling gowns, the glamour that once held him rose before him. But now he saw her clearly. Sophia cared only for herself, for her schedule, for the glow of fame he provided. Not once had she truly cared for his heart. A final call sealed it. Her voice came through the line, smooth and detached. "Daniel, I have to run. But everything's fine, isn't it? His chest hollowed, but his decision was firm. Drawing a deep breath, he spoke with quiet resolve. Sophia, we're finished. We were never meant to be, and I no longer need the illusions of glitter and fame. Ending the call, he felt a weight lift, but his heart still ached, aching for Emma. Without delay, Daniel began the search. He hired 3 private investigation firms, ran notices, poured every resource into tracing Emma's steps. But London was vast, teeming with millions, and Emma, ordinary quiet with few connections, seemed to vanish into its endless tide. Each day became torment. Daniel roamed the streets, checking small hotels, boarding houses, every corner where she might be. All in vain. No sign, no whisper, only silence. The Whitmore mansion, once warmed by her presence, became a hollow shell where every room, every wall reminded him of her absence and his betrayal. At his lowest, Daniel sat still in his chair, staring at the city lights, his hands brushing against the things Emma once touched the pillow. She adjusted the book. She read aloud the breakfast tray she carried. Each object whispered the same truth. The worth of a person could not be measured by money, fame, or power. He had spent years chasing illusions, yet the truest treasure, her love, had slipped from his grasp through a single mistake. One evening, standing on the 60th floor balcony, he found himself replaying her smallest gestures, the way she smoothed his pillow, the warmth in her eyes, as she listened, the tender smile she wore at dawn. These moments had become treasures, priceless, beyond anything his fortune could buy. He knew if he wanted redemption, he would have to act. But love could never be forced. Emma had the right to choose her own happiness. All he could do was search, confess his regret, and pray that if fate allowed, she would hear him out. Sophia returned briefly after a trip to Milan, crossing paths with Daniel once more. She found him standing whole again. "Daniel, you're walking. I didn't know you'd recovered." Her surprise rang hollow. Daniel offered only a faint smile, his gaze turning to the horizon. The glamour no longer mattered. Her presence no longer touched him. That chapter was closed forever. Day after day, Daniel pressed on, pouring everything into finding Emma. Detectives' calls, searches through every street, every forgotten alley of London. Yet she remained out of reach, the city swallowing her like a tide. Each day, without her, felt heavier, unbearable, a rhythm of despair he could not escape. Yet in that despair, Daniel learned a truth: wealth, power, status, mere surfaces. True value lived in sincerity, in compassion, in love. And Emma, simple, yet radiant with kindness, had proven this with every breath. The Whitmore mansion, once gleaming with splendor, became a hollow home where Daniel lived, surrounded by loneliness, regret, and silence. Yet within that silence came clarity, a reminder that the heart, with its honesty and tenderness, mattered more than anything the world could give. Daniel sat in the fading twilight, his hand resting on the wheelchair, a symbol of the lies that had cost him everything. But his eyes turned to the horizon, burning with resolve. Somewhere out there was Emma. And one day he would find her, beg her forgiveness, and if fortune allowed, earn her love once more. His heart was torn, but it beat now with a determination stronger than any ambition he had ever known. Chapter 9. Sending a Message. Through Lucas, London glowed under the soft light of morning. But for Daniel Whitmore, the city felt gray, cloaked in despair. Days of searching for Emma Hayes had led to nothing. The Whitmore mansion, once filled with her warmth, her presence, Her quiet laughter now echoed only with silence and loneliness. Daniel knew he could no longer reach her directly, at least not now. But he could not stop thinking about how to apologize, how to show his remorse. A single possibility came to mind. Lucas Hayes, Emma's younger brother, a medical student at one of London's prestigious universities. Lucas was at the heart of Emma's world, and Daniel realized that through him, he might send the message Emma needed to hear. With new resolve, he set out to find Lucas, carrying not excuses, but the truth of his regret and love. The university library was vast, and hushed shafts of light falling through tall windows onto rows of heavy books. Daniel entered his heart, racing with a mix of tension and hope. And there among the sea of volumes, he saw Lucas tall, focused, his eyes sharp and guarded as he studied. In his serious features, Daniel caught glimpses of Emma, her steady gaze, her resilient spirit, her quiet strength. Daniel drew in a breath, stepping closer to his table. His voice trembled, but rang with sincerity. "Hello. I'm Daniel Whitmore. I've come to apologize and to ask you to deliver something important to Emma." Lucas's eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing. "You're the man who hurt my sister, aren't you?" His voice carried both steel and anger. Daniel nodded, the weight of guilt pressing heavily on him. "Yes. I did something terribly wrong. I deceived. Emma made her believe I was paralyzed just to test her love. It was cruel, unforgivable. I had no right to play with her heart. I love her. And if I could turn back time, I would never have deceived her, not once." His voice broke his gaze, lowering to the table, hands clenched tight. Lucas remained silent, listening intently, his eyes cool but watchful. Forgiveness was not easily given, and Daniel's chest tightened under the weight of that truth. He pressed on, voice unsteady, yet firm. "I know I cannot ask her to forgive me quickly. I only want her to know that my love is real, that I regret everything, and that I will do whatever it takes to make it right if she will let me." Silence lingered in the air. Lucas closed his book, his gaze heavy but steady, his tone calm and firm. "Do you understand? Love cannot exist with lies. Emma deserves honesty. If you truly love her, then respect her decision. Don't force her. Don't deceive her again. Let her choose." Daniel nodded, feeling both pain and a strange sense of relief. Lucas wasn't just Emma's protector. He was also the voice of truth, teaching Daniel what love really meant. Love was not a test, not a scheme. It demanded honesty and respect above all. "I understand," Daniel said quietly. "And I promise, I will never cause her pain again. I only want her to know that I love her, that my deception was the greatest mistake of my life, and I am ready to accept any consequence." Lucas studied him for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful, yet guarded. At last he replied, "You've said what you needed to. I will make sure Emma hears your words. But after that, it's her choice. You must accept whatever she decides." Daniel bowed his head, remorse flooding him. He knew now more than ever that wealth, power, and fame meant nothing if love was built on lies. The bitter lesson was clear. The true worth of a man lay in his sincerity, his integrity, and his respect for the one he loved. Leaving the library, Daniel stood outside, looking over the sprawling city. Loneliness still clung to him, but within it, a new determination burned. His message had been sent. Now he would have to wait with patience and humility, proving himself worthy of Emma's heart. And in that moment, Daniel also saw the sharp contrast between Emma and Sophia. Sophia had left when his strength and wealth had faltered, her love tied to the shine of power. Emma, by contrast, deserved to be loved for who she truly was, for her honesty, her kindness, her sacrifices given without expectation. Daniel's heart stirred, not with desperation, but with the tender reverence of a man who had learned to value, to regret, and to wait. The London afternoon dimmed the library's tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Daniel walked away, carrying both despair and hope. He knew the road to Emma's heart would be long, but at least the truth had been spoken that love cannot survive in lies, and the final choice belonged to the woman he truly loved. This moment was not only a turning point in their story, but also a deep lesson etched into Daniel's soul that the heart's sincerity and respect would always outweigh the power, wealth, and ambition he had once chased. Chapter 10. Reunion and Happiness. London welcomed a late autumn morning, golden sunlight filtering through the trees of Hyde Park, scattering red and yellow leaves across the cobbled paths. Daniel Whitmore stood before the wooden bench where 3 years earlier he had first met Emma, a meeting that, though unremarkable at the time, had become the turning point of his life. His heart beat fast, not with fear, but with hope. Hope that Emma would come and grant him a second chance. And then along the leaf-strewn path, Emma appeared. She wore a simple beige coat, her hair loose, her face calm, her eyes radiant, the very eyes that had first shaken Daniel to his core. They stopped a few steps apart, but the distance between them felt like an ocean, spanning 3 years of loneliness, regret, and words left unspoken. Emma's voice was low, gentle, yet firm. 3 years ago, I trusted you, and you hurt me. But now, I see you've truly changed. You're different, and I will give you a chance. Daniel felt his heart burst. He stepped forward, gently taking her hand in his. Emma, thank you. Thank you for trusting me again. I promise I will never lie to you, never hurt you ever again. Silence wrapped around them, broken only by the rustle of autumn leaves beneath their feet, and the rhythm of two hearts finding their way back together. In that moment, all of Daniel's pain, regret, and despair of the past 3 years dissolved, replaced by overflowing happiness and the sense of being saved. Weeks later, Daniel prepared a simple but meaningful evening in the winter garden of the Whitmore mansion. Lanterns and candles glowed softly among the flowers, casting the space in warmth and romance. Standing amid the blooms, his eyes fixed on Emma, Daniel's heart pounded with love and sincerity. Holding her hand, his voice trembled, yet carried clear and steady. Emma, I lost you once, and in that time, I learned the greatest truth. You are the most important part of my life. I cannot promise you wealth or power, but I can promise you honesty, love, and my life. Will you marry me? Emma gazed into his eyes and saw all the remorse, all the truth of his love he had never spoken before. She smiled softly. I will, but only once, Daniel. If there is ever another lie, it will be over forever. Tears welled as Daniel tightened his hold on her hand. His heart felt as if it would explode with joy, and the winter garden shone with the light of candles and love. Their wedding a year later was simple, but deeply moving. There were no paparazzi flashes, no glittering celebrity guests, no extravagant spectacle, only family, close friends, and those who had witnessed Daniel's journey of change. Lucas stood proudly beside Emma, relieved to see his sister walk with a man who had learned to love sincerely. Henry Collins, too, was there, smiling quietly as he watched his lifelong friend finally find true happiness. When Emma walked down the aisle strewn with white flowers, Daniel felt his heart stop. All the wealth, all the power, all the acclaim of his past, none compared to this single moment. Happiness, he realized, was not measured by money or fame, but by sincerity, forgiveness, and love. After the wedding, Daniel and Emma returned to the Whitmore mansion. No longer a symbol of power, it became their true home, a sanctuary of warmth and love. Together, they cooked breakfast, walked through the winter garden, spoke of little things filled with joy and harmony. Each day, Daniel felt a new kind of happiness, one born not of luxury, but of being loved and cared for sincerely and simply. 2 years later, Emma gave birth to their daughter. They named her Grace, a symbol of renewal of happiness, of life's most precious gift. When Daniel held Grace in his arms for the first time, tears streamed down his face, his heart overwhelmed by a joy money and power had never given him. He whispered to Emma, his voice breaking, "I once thought my greatest success was my company, the numbers on the stock exchange. But now I know my greatest success is having you and Grace." Emma smiled, brushing his hair gently, her eyes glowing with love. "We've endured loss, but because of that, we've learned to treasure true happiness." The mansion that once symbolized loneliness and deception was now filled with laughter, warmth, and love. On weekends, Daniel and Emma took Grace back to Hyde Park, the place where it all began. Sitting on the familiar bench, watching their daughter play among the falling leaves, they held hands, hearts overflowing with gratitude and peace. Daniel knew with certainty that happiness could not be measured by possessions, power, or fame. It lived in sincerity, in forgiveness, in love freely given. Emma, simple, kind, and selfless, had taught him life's most precious lesson. True happiness comes from the heart, from honest gestures, from cherishing the one beside you. The Winter Garden, Hyde Park, the Whitmore Mansion, all became more than places. They were living memories of loss, redemption, and the rediscovery of true love. Daniel and Emma, hand in hand, watched their daughter run through golden leaves, their hearts full of gratitude and peace. This was the happiness they had once longed for, and now knew nothing could ever take away. And so, the story did not end in glitter or grandeur, but in life's simplest and truest treasures, love, forgiveness, and happiness born of the heart. Daniel and Emma had found each other through storms, survived lies and trials, and now had a complete family where love was and always would be the most precious gift of all. The Whitmore Mansion was no longer a symbol of wealth or power. It had become a true home, a place where hearts were filled with love and sincerity. Daniel and Emma had walked through trials, lies, and despair, only to discover the real meaning of happiness: honesty, kindness, and love given without condition. Each morning, soft golden light filtered through the dining room windows, shining on simple breakfasts that felt richer than any banquet. Daniel and Emma prepared meals together, laughing over small conversations, cherishing little moments that money and fame had never given him before. The mansion that once felt cold and distant now came alive with the laughter of their daughter Grace, their symbol of renewal, their living proof of happiness. On weekends, their small family returned to Hyde Park, to the wooden bench, where everything had once begun again after loss and heartbreak. Hand in hand, Daniel and Emma watched Grace run among the falling leaves, their hearts overflowing with gratitude. Every pain, every mistake, every deception had become a lesson, teaching them to cherish each other and to love with their whole hearts. Daniel knew now that financial success, power, and prestige were nothing but empty shells without love and sincerity. Emma, the quiet, gentle soul with unshakable compassion, had shown him what truly mattered. Happiness is not measured in wealth or possessions, but in honesty, forgiveness, and a heart that knows how to love. The winter garden, where Daniel had once proposed, needed no glittering chandeliers or extravagant displays, just candles, flowers, and two hearts that had learned to treasure each other. In that simplicity, every moment became priceless. When Daniel first held Grace in his arms, tears spilled down his face. He whispered to Emma, his voice trembling, "I once thought my greatest success was the numbers on the stock exchange. But now, I know my greatest success is having you and our daughter." Emma smiled, her eyes shining with love and joy. Together, they had found each other, healed their wounds, and built a life filled with warmth and peace. This story does not end with luxury fast cars or yachts. It ends with sincerity and simple joy. Daniel and Emma, hand in hand, watched their daughter run across the grass, reminding each other that true love endures every trial, every mistake, and that happiness is real only when it is built from the heart, from forgiveness, and from love that asks for nothing in return. London glowed beneath the setting sun, but the brightest light lived within Daniel and Emma's hearts, the light of love and happiness they had finally found. Their story closed not with riches or fame, but with a life of simplicity and devotion, where sincerity, forgiveness, and true love were the most valuable treasures of all. And if the story of Daniel and Emma has touched your heart, remember, this true love is never measured by money or ambition, but by honesty, care, and the grace of forgiveness. Cherish those who stand by you in your hardest moments, the ones who love you for who you are, not for what you have. For as Daniel finally learned, the real worth of life lies in the heart, not in possessions. If this story has inspired you or brought you warmth, click like to support the channel. Hit subscribe so you won't miss the next heartfelt story, and share this video with someone you love to remind them that real happiness always begins with true love. Most of all, love and treasure those beside you today. Don't wait until they are gone to realize their worth. Happiness is simple. True love is priceless. That is life's greatest gift.